Madam President, today we are on the Senate floor at a time when once again we're attempting as a country to reconcile things that should have been reconciled long ago. The deaths of George Floyd, of Breonna Taylor, of Ahmaud Arbery shocked the country, outraged the country. Three of them in a very short period of time brought up again this division we have in our country, where we look at the country and particularly we look at law enforcement in two different ways. The discussion I had with and have with my sons is different than the discussion that many of my African American friends, in fact, as far as I know, all of my African American friends that have ever talked to me about this have with their sons. With my sons, I would say if you get in trouble, look for a police officer. That is not the police officer discussion that African American fathers often have with their sons. That discussion goes more like, if you're picked up by the police, do exactly what you're told until I get there, and we'll straighten it out once I get there. That's the two views of what happens, and we see in all of these cases some reason to believe that those concerns are absolute and legitimate. There's, because of that, I think, a wide support for the protests going on around the country that our leadership stake out today on the Republican side. Everybody with great, I think, understanding and emotion and empathy talked about the importance of peaceful protest as we see these things having had happen. The problem, Madam Speaker, is that, Madam President, is we have protests peacefully during the day that turn into violence and chaos at night. Peaceful protest shouldn't become a cover for violent activity. In fact, one of my good friends who's planned some protest marches told me today that there has never been a peaceful protest march planned for the nighttime. The nighttime is not the time for peaceful protest marching. It might be the time for a candlelight visual, but not time for peaceful protests. So what we see at night, people who either weren't part of that daytime protesting activity or were there in the daytime so they could transition to violence and looting at night, is absolutely outrageous, absolutely unacceptable. We saw George Floyd's brother yesterday go to the place where his brother died and say, if I am not looting, if I am not rioting, if I am not destroying other people's property, why would you be doing that? He was saying, I've lost my brother and I'm not trying to destroy my neighborhood because I lost my brother. I'm not trying to destroy his neighborhood because my brother is gone. But we see activities happen that are unacceptable on all fronts. Last night in St. Louis, we had 4 police officers shot in the line of duty in what sometime earlier in the day had been anticipated that at the City Justice Center there'd be a planned violent activity. You don't manage to shoot 4 police officers unless you're thinking about it and normally thinking about it in advance. But that's what happened. Fortunately, those wounds were all survivable. But talked to people in the police department in St. Louis today, and they had 6 other events last night where police were shot at during the course of the night. And we need to realize that the police officers who are working, the National Guard's men and women who are working, are out there risking their lives trying to protect others. We need to realize that when they go to work every day, the members of their family have every reason to be concerned all day, every day, of what might happen. They don't know what door the person they love may be asked to knock on, what car they may stop, what moment may happen that makes the difficult life of being in law enforcement even more difficult. And we've certainly seen plenty of tragedies there. in recent years, too. It hasn't been that long ago that police officers were being ambushed routinely, and in a number of police officers killed while on duty, not while they were trying to apprehend a felon, but when somebody just walks up behind them in the car or on the street and their life is ended. Then we see the horrifying image of George Floyd's murder, and we have the same fear for people in that situation and the people that they love. In fact, nobody should live in fear in our society of just their personal safety, not the law enforcement officers, not their families, not people who are peacefully protesting, or people who have violated the law and are being arrested as they should be, but not with the result that we saw. Whether that arrest was appropriate or not, in no arrest is it appropriate to decide you're going to be the punishing officer as well as the arresting officer. And those who are in power should be held accountable. Those who are in power should set an example. I talked this morning to the police chief in Kansas City, Rick Smith, who tomorrow will be joining a unity march with other leaders in the community and protesters in the community, marching along with the protesters with Chief Smith and other officers and other elected leaders, and that's one way to begin to resolve this. I'd also think, Madam President, having had some experience with this particular topic, that the Justice Department needs to reinstate their full review of department pattern and practice. This is something that they've walked away from in recent years, but in our state, we've had 3 departments since 2014 that had a full pattern and practice review by the Justice Department. At least one of those entered into a consent decree with the department as to how they would focus in the future. I think one of those 3, St. Louis County, asked for the review. St. Louis County, the city of Ferguson, St. Louis City all believe that they benefited from that review. Reviewing an officer or a number of officers is just often not enough. So I'm encouraging the Department of Justice to get back to having one of the options on the table, a full review by the Civil Rights Division or some other division in the Justice Department, depending on the circumstances of not only the procedures, but also the pattern that a department may have fallen into. We cannot continue over and over again to have the same thing happen as we as society try to grapple with the same exact problem. This is not a new problem. It is long past the time we should have figured out how to deal with it. If departments need help in figuring out how to deal with it, that's one of the things that, whether it was St. Louis or Baltimore, the Justice Department has shown some ability and some success in doing. I hope they'll look at that again as they look at these 3 incidents that I've mentioned today and others. It is time to move forward. It is well past time to move forward. It's time when people should have a society that they have confidence in the institutions of the society, and those who serve in law enforcement and public assistance of all kinds should also have the appreciation and respect that we should have for them. And of course, that's a contract where you earn that respect, but you also get that respect when you've earned it, as well over 99.9% of those who serve every day do.